So now, moving on to our next speaker, his name is Oliynyk, who's a senior UX advisor at Fannie Mae, and his speech is about designing for serendipity. So, hi, welcome.
Hey folks, my name is Kit, and yeah, today we're gonna talk about chaos, uncertainty, and entropy in the UX. Sounds an awful lot like our day-to-day jobs, right? But in fact, there is a lot of chaos and uncertainty going on pretty much everywhere these days. Being a Ukrainian, I keep going back to the beginning of 2022 when almost all the people on TV, the internet, so-called Western experts were dead sure that Russia isn't going to attack. And then a week later, they were all sure that Ukraine is doomed and won't last 3 days. Of course, none of that happened, which kind of reminds us that the best laid plans of mice and men often go wrong, which basically means that what we think is likely to happen is not necessarily going to happen. As designers, we try to lay plans all the time. So I started thinking, how can we design for the unknown? We have a lot of misconceptions about chaos. We tend to think that chaos is bad and order is good because we conflate order with something known, with knowledge. Knowledge is good. And we're really scared of anything we don't know. But hey, we know from quantum physics that universe tends towards entropy. It's a really nerdy way of saying that everything is meant to be chaotic and unpredictable. And knowing what's going to happen, the future, doesn't necessarily make it good. The opposite is also true. The cool thing about chaos is that even if it's unpredictable, it's not necessarily bad. There are pleasant surprises. So I want to talk about my favorite word in the entire English language, serendipity. Seriously, when I started learning English, I was 6, and the first thing they told me was to get a good English dictionary. So I went into a bookstore in Kyiv, Ukraine, and there were dozens of those. And so I asked, well, how can I tell if the dictionary is good? They said, well, check if it has the word serendipity in it. It's a rare word, so it must mean the dictionary is good. And then when I started writing this talk, I wanted to define this rare word for you all, just in case. So I went on Merriam-Webster and bam, it was their word of the day. I shit you not. That's serendipity. That's magic. But it's also a good example of the kind of UX we're going to talk about. This unintentional stumbling upon something amazing. All right, here's a quick recap. We exist in a highly chaotic universe. Chaos produces random events, which leads to our random experiences. Some are good, some are bad. Good random experiences is what we call luck. And serendipity is the kind of lucky experience where you discover something awesome you haven't even been looking for. A good example of serendipity is The Witcher, Geralt of Rivia, who finds a girl, Ciri, due to the law of surprise. Give me what you find at home, yet you don't expect. It's certainly magical and unexpected, but if you read the book or seen the movie, you remember that it happened because there were precisely the right conditions for them to meet to create this serendipity. What are those conditions? Well, in digital UX, serendipity is a positive, unexpected, effortless discovery. It needs to be easy because as users, we don't feel magic if we need to work really hard for it. And to make something positive and unexpected, you need a lot of research. You need to know what kind of surprise even could be good for the user, because not all surprises are good. You also need to give people agency so that they can devote their attention and cognitive capacity for that surprise and enjoy it. So it needs to happen precisely at the right time. Finally, you need to create an environment, an information architecture where something even can be discovered in the first place. So what's information architecture? Okay, for those of you who are in UX quite recently, UX design wasn't always around. Before, there used to be these people, information architects, who created categories and lists and taxonomies, and more broadly, systems to host user experiences. Fast forward to now, our industry matured. Today, we know exactly what people want because we're so excellent at design research. No, we're not. But we kind of forgot how to organize information and architect systems, not just the UI. To facilitate serendipity, you need an environment, a system in which serendipity happens. So there's this entire discipline called systems thinking, and it basically studies what we're trying to hastily define here in 20 minutes, but more systematically. There's a concept in systems thinking called the emergence. It's the unexpected outcome of the system. And the big idea here is if you want it, you design the system to facilitate that emergence organically rather than trying to design that desired outcome itself. How does it work? Well, here's an example from the real brick and mortar architecture. In 1903, Frank Lloyd Wright, my favorite architect, designed one of the first open plan offices in New York, specifically to facilitate serendipity. In this open office, people were bumping into each other, telling each other stories, sharing ideas, and there was a lot of collaboration and innovation that stemmed from it. Tech companies loved the idea, and that's, of course, how we all ended up in noise-canceling headphones. And then after COVID, we started working from home, and bam, no more serendipity other than random memes on your team Slack channel. As our companies are desperately trying to get us back in the office, it's a good reminder that the environment on its own is not enough. Let's make sure we meet the primary needs of our users first before creating the serendipity. All right, so recap, what do we need? We need a lot of user research, a lot of information architecture, and some very, very good UI and visual design to follow on these 4 principles. You're like, but wait a second, Kit, that's like all the design disciplines I know. Yeah. I'm trying to say that serendipity is a kind of good UX, and as such, it requires a lot of these basic design skills from us. Incidentally, what's the difference between serendipity and just any good UX? Well, if you draw a chart between sort of user effort and their emotions, it might look a little like this. Good UX is like good value. You get decently positive emotions for comparable effort. What marketing people call surprise and delight is like thrift store of UX. You get a little bit of good emotions, but very cheap. And then serendipity is great value when you get a lot of positive emotion for very little of effort. All 3 of these things are very important for good design. So let's look into some examples of how that might work. Surprise and delight are typically some good micro interactions that add a little bit of extra value for the user. By our definitions, very simple with very low, almost non-existent expectations, and it's just a tiny bit positive. Now, it's not an unmet user need per se. For example, I didn't need a reminder of my zodiac sign, but nevertheless, it's cute and could cheer someone up. One of the ways to make good UX is anticipation or smart defaults. In this travel app concept on the left, the page background changes dynamically to visualize the weather in the travel destination. It's a very nice touch that could really help people pack accordingly for the trip. Uber app on the right changes its interface by dynamically adding a button for return if you're using the app for the second time in a day. I mean, this is common sense. It sounds almost trivial, right? But designing dynamically is hard for many designers. because of our tools and the very unchaotic way we tend to think of our design process. Because we like order so much, all of our design tools are very deterministic. We design things exactly the way they should look like. And of course, we get really pissed when devs don't get the corner radius just right. And generally speaking, this is how a lot of us designers, especially junior, see their craft. Just make something pixel perfect that then gets coded. All right, here's a quick example. This is a very dribblesque, beautiful GIF, great mock-up, great presentation. But if we look closer, we might find out that this travel journey screen could arguably work only if you're traveling north to south because of the layout. And it's very easy to imagine that someone actually designed this exact visual and used this exact content because that's how our design tools work. It's beautiful. Designer makes a presentation to stakeholders. Everyone likes it. It gets built. And then someone starts using it and oops. A classic example of serendipity in UX is tag cloud navigation. Users can see your information architecture itself, how your data is organized, and then potentially become curious and click on one of those tags and discover something new and unexpected. There's an interesting problem with tag clouds. They're much easier to code than to design. I mean, right? It's just a bitch to prototype in Figma and Sketch. Lots and lots of manual labor. And that's probably why we don't see tag clouds on the internet anymore that often. Funny enough, Figma uses the tag cloud in the community search itself, but to this day, I wasn't able to find a good template or better yet, a plugin in Figma community that would just automatically generate a neat tag cloud UI for my predefined information architecture. If you know it, let me know. I'm slowly moving from Twitter to Mastodon in the light of recent events. And it's really cool because in absence of algorithms, Mastodon relies on these old school tags much more than Twitter used to. And because of that, it facilitates a lot of this wonderful serendipity. It's also important that Mastodon tags, unlike Twitter trends, for example, are defined by users themselves. This approach is called folksonomy, and it's one of the best ways to let people discover something unexpected in your content or data, even though it's messy and chaotic and seems redundant at the first glance. There was a lot of tag clouds, by the way, in the Web 2.0 era, and things like stumble upon. Back then, you could see these orange stumble buttons on a bunch of websites. If you'd press it, it would take you to a random website loosely based on your interests, where you could just click a button again and again to keep stumbling upon these wonderful and unexpected sites. Using it felt very joyful and simple back in the day, and very similar to what we're trying to define today as serendipity. But now, of course, no one uses StumbleUpon anymore because we have Google. So I thought maybe Google's I'm feeling lucky button can deliver serendipity. When I tried it, Google just gave me this restaurant website. Why are you showing me this, Google? I'm not even in New York, and you know it because I'm logged in and there's an address in my profile. Oh, I know why. Because this website's SEO rank is really high, and Google's information architecture is tailored towards search, but not smart enough to support this emergence, this serendipity. It could have been designed differently. Amazon has machine learning and a very well taxonomied structure with categories, but this discovery process is even worse than Google's. Why are you recommending this to me, Amazon? I already have a vacuum cleaner, an amp, a thermometer, and guitar strings, and you know it because I bought it from you. So just giving people related items, things from the same categories people interacted with, perhaps is not serendipity as well. Spotify does a very, very good job in facilitating serendipity with Discover Weekly. It's effortless. It has surprisingly high chance of actually finding the music I like. How does it work? Well, it took several years for them to get it right. You can read an article on the internet about it. It's fascinating. So it uses the combination of all of the above: information architecture in a form of song metadata, machine learning and my past choices, and even pattern recognition in the song lyrics. So it takes a lot of effort, but you can create something really magical with that. All right, by now you're like, Kit, these are billion-dollar enterprise systems. Can we please start with something simple? All right, here are some super simple examples from my old Department of Veterans Affairs work. I'm sure you've designed these simple auto-suggest drop-downs. They're always a good UX, but not necessarily serendipity because user already expects it as they type. Instead, or in addition, try visualizing most relevant or even completely random search terms in the environment around before they even started typing in the form of these tool tips, for example. And maybe this will become serendipitous for someone, give someone good ideas. Sometimes physical and digital systems can work together to create pleasant surprises. For Capital One branches, we've designed a system to help bankers greet their first-time customers by name to create a warm and serendipitous welcome experience. It would pull the customer's information from their phone apps as soon as they enter the branch and then quickly send it over to available banker's iPad just in time so they would raise their eyes and say, "Hi, Kit." But my favorite story of serendipity in the UI is about Foursquare or Swarm. Remember how it was all the rage? Many years ago, I went to a conference in New York and I got a cab in LaGuardia Airport. I was driving to Manhattan, but as I was passing Williamsburg, I got this notification on my phone. Your friend V is nearby at a bar with D and four others. Thing is, my friend V lives in LA and my friend D lives in Seattle. How the hell did they end up in New York? I couldn't miss this opportunity. I edited the trip on my phone, went to the bar, opened the door, and they're sitting right there. I'm like, "Hello, bitches." They're like, "Oh my God, what are the chances?" And it was one of the most magical nights we ever had in our life. I'm very grateful for the designers and devs who made this feature, but it wasn't a part of the original app. So how did they find it? How did they add it? Accidentally, through user research, through accidental insights. In product design, there is a concept of placing bets. If we try to imagine this ginormous app with dozens and dozens of features all at once, it's a very large bet to place. It will take a very long time to design and build. And what if we're wrong? What if not all of those features are actually good or positive or create serendipity and surprises? Because our tools are visual and deterministic, we just love to design as many beautiful screens as possible. And we are placing a very large bet with our business. We're saying, "Hey, business, trust us with this exact Figma thing. We're really good designers, so it just must make you a ton of money." And then design and dev takes a year. We launch. Users think it's meh, and there is no new money, and the old money is spent on us designers. Business gets mad, designers get fired. You know the story. But we're supposed to do research, right? Well, because our tools are so deterministic, everything looks very real, ready to go. So business wants to start building it ASAP. And we ourselves fall in love with our designs too much. when we use research only to validate them, to prove them right, not wrong. We ask people once if they like the prototype. They do, done and done, let's make 100 more Figma screens. And then a year later, it falls apart. But what if we could sell a process instead of just a pretty picture? Market traders make decisions all the time, whether to buy or sell stocks. Stock market is very, very unpredictable, and their bets cost a lot of money. They call it VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, much like the world around us every day. So they build this kind of binary tree of iterative decisions. Each step is a checkpoint to decide whether you're getting positive results and you want to continue investing in the project. It becomes not just your investment plan, but rather your learning plan. If you learn good things, you can keep going and win big. If you learn bad things, you can just walk away and start over. In product design, we have this concept of MVP, minimal viable product. I didn't understand this MVP framework for a long time, the sequence. I kept making point that, well, you can't really make a car out of a skateboard anyhow, and you can't really make a big and beautiful app out of a super simple prototype. So this is all lame, and we should just design the whole thing all at once. I thought I can predict the future well enough to make a useful and best-selling product, but I was wrong time and time again. So now I'm trying to set learning plans instead. I say to my business partners, let's learn how to build skateboards knowing that they probably won't sell, so that later we could build a car together more confidently. So in the end, as you can see, it's all about us and how we think about our design and communicate. To recap, to design for serendipity, we need to design the system around our UX, not just the UI itself. We need to learn what could positively surprise our users. We need to be very, very flexible and dynamic with our design choices. And we need to learn how to test with users, not to validate, but to learn and potentially be wrong. I want to wrap up with the most important takeaway. The best way to learn how to design for chaos is perhaps changing your own life to be less rigid and predictable and more joyful and serendipitous. Break your routine and try something new every day. Talk to strangers while you ride on the bus alone. Follow your instincts and be curious about life and people around you, so that maybe a little bit of serendipity could happen because of you. I want to leave you with a story about my milk brother. So there's this weird concept in Ukraine called milk brothers. My mom couldn't breastfeed, but luckily her best friend gave birth to a son just a month before, so she could feed us both. Of course, we grew up together, became friends. We were playing all the time. And then a few years later, right after my baby sister was born, his family, my brother's family, moved to US. He enlisted in the Marines, went to war, and we lost touch. Years later, when I moved to US myself, we reconnected and became buddies again. And then fast forward to 2012, there was this big football championship, Euro 2012 in Kyiv, Ukraine. And we both love football, so he wanted to go. I couldn't go. My daughter was just born. So I was like, all right, go and have fun. Of course, he wasn't in Kyiv for decades, so he didn't know where to go. So he used this travel website for, some random recommendations. And the website says, well, go to Khreshchatyk. That's the main street in Kyiv downtown. So he goes there, he walks down the street, he bumps into a girl, beautiful girl. He says hi, she says hi. They hit it off. In fact, they hit it off so hard that just 3 days later, she invites him over to meet her mom. So he comes by, he opens the door. The mom looks at him and freaks out. She says, "Hi, Dennis." Turns out she already knows him. Turns out that's my mom. Turns out the girl he bumped into out of millions is my baby sister. That's perhaps the most serendipitous story that I've ever witnessed in my life. But hey, maybe just a little bit of that story actually happened because of that stupid travel website and its random UI recommendations, right? So please remember, magic exists. And then maybe if we try hard enough, we can make it happen as designers. Thank you.